Well, we'll go ahead and get started. My video. Good morning, everyone. Again, this is Steve Kramer. I'm the President and CEO of the Minneapolis Downtown Council, and thank you very much for joining us. I think an engaging conversation we're about to have about the downtown experience across the nation, and I'm going to introduce our stellar panel here just in a moment. But you know, here in Minneapolis, as folks from this area know, our first stay-at-home order was issued in mid-March, and that had an immediate effect on our downtown economy, really slowing things down very, very dramatically. And then a little more than 2 months later, the killing of George Floyd late on Memorial Day, literally about 3 miles from where I sit, south of downtown, really prompted this reckoning about longstanding racial disparities in our community, as well as the right approach to public safety policy. And that reckoning continues to this day and will continue well into the future. And I know these same factors, the impact of COVID, unrest born of kind of racial inequities in our society, affect most cities in our country in varying degrees. And we are so honored and pleased to have really an expert panel of downtown leaders to reflect on their own city's experience and then have a conversation about kind of what this might mean for urban America, not only now, but into the future. And those folks are Tammy Dorr, who's the president and CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership, Andrew Hohen, who is the president and CEO of the Portland Business Alliance, Michael Smith, who's president and CEO of the Charlotte Center City Partners, and Rebecca Matheny, executive director of the Louisville Downtown Partnership. So we've got the entire country covered from East Coast to West Coast. And again, I can't thank the four of them enough for making time in their busy schedules to join us today. Just a word or two more about Minneapolis, and then we'll turn it over to our panelists to make some initial remarks, and then we'll open it up for a conversation. One thing we've done to try to kind of manage through this is just create a scorecard for our downtown economy. And I think that's not an original idea. I've seen many across the country, but Dana, maybe you can show our kind of the three things that we look at. We have a few metrics that we're tracking that just speak to the current state of the downtown economy. You know, office occupancy, hotel occupancy, pedestrian traffic, and a few others. We try to list all of the open restaurants and retail stores in our downtown. And then because this is Minneapolis and we do have winter here, our skyway system is pretty integral to the operation of downtown, and it's been affected in terms of the hours of operations by the COVID impact. So we also kind of keep track of when those skyways are open. Maybe just show the next slide quickly, Dana. These are the metrics that we keep track of and update this on a regular basis. And part of our theory of the case here is that a number of people making decisions about our downtown economy quite literally haven't been downtown for months and months now. And so just helping them understand what really is happening, what are the facts versus the rumors and the media portrayal, we think is something that we can contribute to. We've also been having regular conversations with HR leaders from our major employers just to try to keep a finger on the pulse of their back to office planning, which frankly is slipping further and further into the future. And I think that's probably something we'll want to talk a little bit about with our other four downtown leaders. Working hard just to try to keep the ecosystem of our downtown alive, the restaurants and the independent venues. We don't have the sports fans flooding into our sports venues right now. Hope that will happen in the next professional season. But just trying to kind of make it through this period to a kind of late spring, early summer timeframe when we think things will come back more to life. And then, of course, public safety has just been a huge preoccupation, both at an hour by hour, day by day experience of people who are downtown, residents, visitors, workers on our streets, as well as the larger policy discussion that the George Floyd death in particular has launched in our community about the right way to approach public safety, starting with a number of our council members going to a park in South Minneapolis and announcing to the world that they intended to dismantle our police department, which really caused significant ripples in terms of the economic and social impacts that framing of the issue created, and we're still working our way through that. Again, I think that's a topic that we may want to discuss with our other cities. So that's a little bit about what's going on in Minneapolis. But now I'd like to turn the program over to Michael, and we'll start on the East Coast and work our way west. And Michael, tell us a little bit about your situation in Charlotte.
Steve, thank you. My pleasure to be with all of you and with these great colleagues. I'll share where we are in Charlotte. It's not dissimilar to what you're seeing. I mean, incredible disruption from the pandemic, and our most thriving commerce centers really feel it acutely. We've got this parallel reality where we've got our design district, which is part of our center city, we call it South End, which is faring well. And then you have Uptown, which is our central business district, and it's suffering immensely. You just can't sugarcoat it. These are unprecedented times. We're probably at 10% of our workforce on any given day. Restaurants are on average probably 70% off. Bars were just allowed to open, but only for outdoor capacity. Our hotel occupancy is at about a third. Homelessness hasn't changed that much. It's just more pronounced. Tent cities forming. What I'm describing to you is a long way back. And, since this period of health and economic disruption, we've been focused acutely on our stakeholders, trying to really flex our program of work and our service to make sure we were hitting what they needed most. We changed our focus, which is normally 18-month timelines, to 6-month timelines, because it just continues to change. Steve, like you, we are constantly in contact with our major employers and trying to understand the way they are looking at their business model and their return to work plans. We're focusing on a couple things. Number one, how do we position ourselves to thrive in the recovery? But what do we do in the next 6 months to make sure that we've got a lot of our storefront, our entrepreneurs, the folks that make the personality of our downtown, how do we help them through it? And, we, like many of you, we just completed our most prolific decade of development across all categories. We feel really good about the recovery. I mean, we got 4 million square feet just delivered, 4,000 hotel rooms. We announced 5,000 jobs in 2019. It was a lot of wind at our back, kind of running downhill. But, we also, I think the thing we all have to remember is, we manage districts that have billions of dollars of institutional investment. We've got decades of infrastructure, and we're all going to be pulling in the same direction. So it kind of brings us back to the way we're looking at our near term, so the next 6 months. And it's weekly programming with our cultural partners. It's a marketing campaign that we refer to as Show Up for Uptown. We launched a small business innovation fund. We raised $4 million, and we're going to be granting it out in really small bites. Think $20,000, $40,000 grants. We've granted to 71 businesses now. We just opened our third round of granting. We're working with major employers to reduce barriers to bring people back into Uptown. Think free parking, think active programming, and more. And then we're now launching an Uptown community card, where we're asking our major employers to join a gift card program, give these gift cards to their employees. The cards will be dedicated to only use with Uptown businesses. So it's a very local business and geographically tight effort. So, for example, a major employer might buy 1,500 $100 cards and give them as perks to employees. The idea that we're trying to do is we're trying to create demand for these businesses and find reasons for the employees to come back up and support these businesses, preserve the vibrancy, but have a safe and special experience. That's where we are quickly.
That's terrific, Michael. Thanks. It's a great overview. Rebecca, how about Louisville?
Yeah, so I think I would echo a lot of what Michael said, and I also need to say that without him, I wouldn't have survived all of this, because he gave me the best advice on how to survive this, because they had this happen 5 years ago, sure, in addition to this time. So he's a great He's a great advisor. So very much the same kinds of statistics as you're seeing and as Michael's discussing. And you know, the occupancy, we're not seeing, of course, the lease rates fall, but in terms of having butts in seats downtown, which supports all of our restaurants, we're seeing pretty much the same statistics. We've got about 20 to 25% of office workers who are showing up daily. What we're hearing is just constant concerns about safety. There's a lot of misperception about what happened and what happened downtown. I think Minneapolis perhaps is in a little bit of a different position in terms of where a lot of the unrest was. But because ours was so focused on downtown, and people just started to take the boards down. So we probably have about, because everybody boarded up. And that is such a bad message. And there's such a terrible perception. So we also are working on a campaign that is about why downtown is safe. We got together a community of business leaders who were all furious at the mayor and really wanting direct communication. And they were unfortunately going straight to the press with their concerns. It's like, if you're trying to rent an office building, I wouldn't think that you would want to talk about how bad downtown is, but it turns out that's a little counterintuitive, but that's what happened. So we had several large tower folks that kind of pulled this press push that was fairly distressing and not very helpful. But we have since flipped that group of people. We got the mayor off the call, which was probably pretty important, and started to call it the Friends of Downtown, to really try and have people understand that if they aren't part of helping us share a positive message, then it's not going to work well for anybody. And that has been very well received, which has been really terrific. We've been talking about a return to work and having workers return downtown, and that doesn't sound like it's going to happen until March in any significant way. And there are some permanent changes. Now, some of those changes were coming down the path anyway. You know, we've been watching people work remotely. You know, there are a couple of things that have, I think that this pandemic, and then in our case, I forgot to say that we're the home of the Breonna Taylor crisis. So, so much like Minneapolis, you know, we have had a very specific and very national. So that has made really tourism struggle a lot in terms of getting groups here and having them. And we tend to be a little bit more regional, and we tend to have more conservative groups come. And so we're really trying to work on that. I agree with Michael that the street population hasn't changed significantly, but the visibility has, and that's another thing that we have been hearing from businesses. So we're doing outreach in terms of moving forward. You know, we're doing outreach to Metro Council in terms of supporting us in terms of safety and security, but also outreach to our partners in the social services community to try and figure out how we mitigate street behavior. And that that's been, of course, it's one of every downtown organization's biggest challenge. The equity piece of this has played out in a very interesting way, and I'm sure other communities are experiencing this, where this is such a fractured group of people who are protesting, deliberately so, you know, without leadership. They've structured this very differently. And so we really, luckily, you know, we had internalized the message downtown is for all years ago, but I think that we have been able to hopefully let people know that. And I think that messaging moving forward is very, very important. We're also thinking about doing an initiative because we have a number of our retail, our existing retail that has survived are all Black serving businesses, not necessarily Black owned businesses. So we're really focusing on how to support Black or minority owned businesses downtown. So that has been something that we've been very focused on. But there have been, I think, a number of conflicts that we didn't really anticipate between different competing narratives downtown. And so again, that's part of our focus on getting everybody on the same page about telling a positive story. The other thing that we're doing is, while there are not folks downtown, we're trying to knock out a bunch of infrastructure. So we sped up the permit process and really focused on getting the utilities to move. Like, here, let's do this now. And they like it because obviously they don't have to worry about as many conflicts, and we don't either. So those are sort of what we've done. And then just really that communication. And then the last thing I'd say, and then I hand it off to the ever more articulate than I am, Tammy Dorr. It's never good to go between Michael and Tammy. Is Class A, and really focusing on shift of use and trying to get folks who haven't been able to enter the downtown market. So we're doing a lot of outreach to entrepreneurs, small businesses, lots of folks who haven't been able to be here for many different reasons, and who tend to be much more risk tolerant. So we're really focused on trying to work with our commercial real estate community to get those folks to be downtown. So,
Great. Rebecca, thanks. That's terrific. I may want to come back and revisit that question of how do we message the public safety concerns, in a nuanced way that doesn't create a self-fulfilling prophecy, but underscores the importance of the issue for our downtown business community. The aforementioned Tammy Dorr. Tammy, take it away. How is in Denver?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. Let me just give you a brief overview of what we're seeing here. And to note, the reality is what we're experiencing in Denver is really not that different than what every urban center is seeing across the country. Everyone today on the call is going to share a lot of the same experiences, each piece with a varying level of intensity. Let me talk about some of the metrics we're watching. Pedestrian traffic, as you've heard, is a key factor in identifying whether or not you're coming back. We're running at about 30%, and we're having a big increase in leisure travel. Keeping in mind that Denver, for all intents and purposes, is in the middle of nowhere. We don't have a bunch of cities next to us, so we are a really good destination for people who are quarantined that want to take a day trip, a weekend trip. So actually, we're seeing a big increase in leisure visitors. Certainly not enough to say that our economy is being blown out of the water by it. In addition, we are closely monitoring the return to work of employees, and we're running at about 15% of employees coming back to work. We don't expect to see a big change in that until after first quarter. I think our bigger concern is that we believe across the nation and in our urban centers, some of the slowdown of bringing people back to work also relates to concerns that we think there's going to be another very big round of layoffs. And there is hesitancy to bring people back to the office environment when companies are determining their productivity and efficiencies and how they can adjust for that from an employee-based standpoint. So our goal here is mitigate risk, prepare to thrive. We are seeding big ideas, addressing immediate issues, and focusing on midterm actions, meaning that we're trying to keep the community psyche up by having some really big visionary fun, if we can say that these days, projects like building a huge bike kind of cultural trail around our center city, a destination place, and looking at major art installations. But at the same time, make no mistake, we have big issues. primarily what I would say is homelessness. And although homelessness is on the rise here, it's not exponentially on the rise, but we have about a 70% increase in individuals that are on the streets versus taking services. And it is not because we do not have access to those services or they're not available, at least in terms of our shelter system. Further down the chain in terms of permanent housing, we have a lot to be resolved. But because of that, our encampments have grown. And in Denver, we do have a ban on urban camping, which was set aside because of COVID, and it got very out of control, and now it is really now being reinforced. This is a big deal because Denver is a relatively young city in the sense that in 2005, 2006, we really didn't have hardly anybody living downtown. We were teaching people that you could live in an urban center. So our growth as a city, our transportation structure, network, this has all really been built out in about the last 15 years. I emphasize that because the challenges seen in longer standing cities are viewed as much part of the urban fabric. Here, people are still shocked to see rises in crime. I think sometimes we believe that as our city grows, only the good stuff grows, and people forget that everything grows when your city grows. So we're launching a new security action plan, which I'm happy to share with anyone in any part of the country to really address this. And then again, we're trying to just balance welcoming people back to work and seeding big ideas. I'll add one last point for context. We don't believe that across the nation, nor in Denver, is COVID one of the primary reasons that employees are resisting coming back to work. In fact, we surveyed and found that 70% of our employees stated that their physical safety and the environment was the reason that they were hesitant to come back to the Center City location. 30% or less addressed COVID or using public transportation. I don't know what it is. I think some of it is also, this is a good lifestyle for a lot of people, and I think companies are going to have a hard time making that cultural shift. Thanks, Steve.
Great. Thanks, Tammy. Thanks for those remarks. Andrew, Portland, much in the news, and you've been busy, so happy to get an update from you.
Thanks so much, Steve. And yes, I suppose we have been in the news quite a bit recently. And first off, thank you to your team, Dana, who I understand is from the proud state of Wisconsin, which is my home state. And I would be remiss if I did not say go Pack Go. I'm sorry to everyone else on the call today. I want to first acknowledge my remark.
He threatened to wear a cheese head, everybody, so I'm grateful he did at least do that.
He talked me off the cliff there. So, but I can say I have a brother who is a proud U of M graduate and love both the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, of course. And I just want to acknowledge my team who's on this call as well. Maureen Fisher runs our downtown services. Mark Schlesinger is the chair of our downtown Portland Clean and Safe Business Improvement District, which is an affiliate of the Portland Business Alliance. And much like other chambers across the nation, we have deep ties with our downtown Business Improvement District and work in a contractual fashion with them. And I'd love to give a little context for everyone on the call about Portland in a sense. And it is a region of 2.7 million people, which makes up the 7-county region. And across this district, there's about 1.2 million jobs. Here in our downtown core of roughly 213 blocks, there are 100,000 employees, and that does not include the residential population. And over the past 2 decades, not just Portland, but the state of Oregon has experienced unprecedented job creation and boom times, both in demographic population shift and its growth of its commercial real estate industry here in the downtown core, and an overall sort of upskilling in economic weight and might. I most recently moved from Brooklyn, New York, where I ran the Chamber of Commerce there, was a board member of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, and I have just a true deep love of downtowns, and I'm just so happy to be with colleagues who I admire both their cities and their organizations today. And to give you a little bit of sense of the downtown in the context of the overall economy, I want to just read out a little bit of the experience over the past 8-9 months that we've all been going through. But before the pandemic hit here in Oregon, unemployment was at 3.5%, and it spiked to 17% in the state. At one point, 280,000 Oregonians had filed unemployment claims, and the unemployment rate has since fallen to around 11% here in the state. Locally in the downtown core, some really fascinating data here. Before the COVID closures, our retail vacancy rate was at 4%, and similarly outstanding commercial office vacancy rates. And we were in a process, and still to this day, in the development and building of new office, residential, and retail. Since COVID, things have changed broadly and dramatically, and that includes, we similarly have done a lot of survey work of our downtown core, but of the retail members here, 718 retail spaces in our downtown core. Of those 718, 430 remain open, but 170 of them have temporarily closed and another 20 permanently. So you can imagine the conditions that are happening on the street when you visually walk downtown. We're in what's known as phase 1 of COVID reopening plans. That does not include a return to work of office. So the feelings in downtown are remarkably empty, and I'm sure similar to what all of you are experiencing. On top of that, we've had over 100 days of unrest since the death of George Floyd. On top of that, we have wildfire closures. For those of you not from the West Coast, this is something I can assure you is something to experience. It is tremendously awful and detrimental, not just to the broader environment, but to you as an individual. Being in the midst of smoke is usually the signal to go run and get away, but here you are trapped, so to speak. There's been any number of broad-based initiatives to support continued economic resiliency. I know we'll get into that throughout the panel discussion. But what we are doing now is really sending the message of falling back in love with your downtown, because I think so much of the negativity that we've experienced needs to recapture and repivot the brand and image of this downtown, which is stunning. I'm sitting in it right now, and deserves its community support and economic vitality that it provides to both our city, our region, and our state. So looking forward to the conversation, and thanks for the invitation today.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks to all of you for those insightful overviews. Maybe just picking up on Andrew's last point, and you've all referred to this in various ways. I mean, all of our cities and most of urban America has gone through this kind of unprecedented time of growth, of reversing the outflow of businesses. Businesses are coming in, our residential populations are growing, and then boom, it just changed. So if we look out, well, two questions. When do you think things will begin to kind of recover for your downtown? And what do you think your economies will look like at that point? Because it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be what it is now. But it's probably not going to be the same as it was in February, March, April, when things began to head the other direction. So what are you forecasting, and how do you think that's going to affect your downtowns kind of going forward? Anybody want to start with that? Michael?
Steve, I'm glad to. So we've got a little bit of a different experience where I've been able to interview our top 10 employers, and what we're hearing from them is the reason that they are still working remote is all connected to COVID. Now, as they survey their employees, there is a rising concern for safety that we've not had in the past. But as far as what is keeping them from bringing the workforce back is COVID. Now, that's the bad news. The good news to this is what they'll share, and this is without exception, all 10 of them. This has been a grand experiment. We've got some new tools to use with working remotely. It does not work at all for back office. For customer facing, it can be used some, but the trade-offs are not good. Culture dilution, developing tomorrow's talent, onboarding new talent, starting new projects, acquiring new customers, kind of the core of any growing and healthy business. And without exception, they have said they want to bring their workforce back. They want to have them together. They need it for the innovation that is the lifeblood of their company. What we're hearing from them is it is going to be second quarter, probably deep second quarter, before we start to see the majority of them back. What we are seeing is smaller firms, law firms, consulting firms, entrepreneurs that have been a little quicker to bring people back. But it's A/B kind of stuff. we really don't think we're going to be have much of a base of the 130,000 daily workers until deep second quarter.
Okay. And will the 130 be back every day, or will it be a smaller census on any given day, given the way that companies are going to manage their workforces post-COVID, do you think?
What they've said is they have not set a date. They've told their employees, we will give you 30, some 60 days notice, just because everybody has adjusted their lifestyle with what they have to do as parents and spouses and everything else. And that they'll come back at first with A, B, or ABC shifts.
Yeah.
We'll work our way through this. I mean, I think there's so much science yet to be unveiled and discovered that will determine so much of this. And I think that's why our planning windows, I think, are getting shorter and shorter and shorter.
Yeah. Tammy, you mentioned you're hearing something a little bit different about what the motivations were about keeping folks out of the office. What are you seeing in Denver? It's kind of that return to work and what's going to look like at that point.
Well, Steve, I think to clarify, our employers are saying they're not bringing the employees back due to COVID. But then we interviewed employees to ask, what is your perspective?
Got it.
And that was different than perhaps we expected. We did expect all of those factors to come into play, but we didn't expect the variation in terms of physical safety versus COVID safety to be so dramatic. And although we've had some protest activity that's turned damaging here, we really haven't had that much of that. It's primarily been peaceful with some significant instances. So this crime and safety issue is definitely more around just the ongoing environment with fewer people on the street. In terms of coming back, I would concur with Michael. We're in deep second quarter, I would say, before we start seeing people come back. I actually believe that we are going to see more people working in the office than people are suggesting, as opposed to a whole hybrid model or more work from home. And the reason is companies that choose to locate in an urban environment generally do so for some very specific reasons about their culture, the type of talent that they're seeking in the environment in which they want to work. So I anticipate some increased flexibility, but overall, I think that what we will see is a pretty strong return of the employment base to working in an office environment with an increased level of flexibility. I'll just add one other note. We launched a pretty big initiative called Building a City for Women as an economic imperative. And we launched that last year. We studied everything from mobility to working environment, et cetera. So what I think is going to happen as well is that some of the challenges that women faced in the work world in terms of staying and growing professionally are going to be addressed. That will give them some increased advantages coming out of this. And some of those circumstances are actually going to be a little bit harder. So we're staying pretty close to that. It's a big part of our workforce.
Thanks, Tammy. Rebecca, what's the trajectory for Louisville, you think?
I always have trouble with the unmute button. You know, one of the interesting things that's different for me from the other speakers is that our economy was never kind of in really boom. We just don't do that here. And so you don't rise as high, and you also don't fall as far. So we also are very dependent on logistics and also on call centers, which of course don't pay as well, but they are not things that work as well remotely. So I think that there is going to be a lot of return of people. The real key is our schools aren't still open, you know, so there's that's a huge challenge. And I don't disagree with that decision, but that has had a massive effect on the ability of businesses to have employees return. I agree entirely with Tammy that I think that more people are going to come back, in part because I don't think they want to be around their dog all day. And you know, they don't want to be around their family all day. And the culture really is that, you know, people are social creatures. So I'm very hopeful, but I agree it's going to be at least Q2, if not deep Q2, which is kind of scary in terms of restaurants and other things.
Andrew, how about Portland?
Sure. I'd probably mirror a lot of what has been said and give a sense of what our employers are saying. There's probably an equal part reaction that through at least the end of the year, most of their employees, or 41%, have indicated will work from home. An equal part, 42%, say they'll do a mix of remote work and some on-site. So at least through 2020, there's a clear indication that there's not a large-scale return to work. Additionally, this state has been one of the most aggressive, or I would term it conservative in its approach to public health. It's one of the lowest infection rates in the nation, as well as mortality, hospitalizations. So the perspective has been a public health lens leading any considerations. We remain remote work in schools as well, so that's one more inhibitor in terms of a return to work. And additionally, I'm sure all of us have been paying attention to the international news today, where we're seeing extreme spikes, not just here in the US, but in Germany, France, Spain, that are all now reverting. So it's our opinion, or my opinion, that we will likely see some form of a reverse action in terms of what is permissible activity within this state and in this city. It just is likely to happen as we move into a flu season that could impact reopening plans through to March, April, and May. I think that's natural. And then one other thing, I would offer this up anecdotally. We asked folks, because we're an event-driven organization, we do a lot of wide-scale and widely attended events. We said, how comfortable will you feel in terms of going to a large event? And the two standout responses were 35% of respondents said when the state of Oregon says it's okay to be in a large-scale event. And then 36% of respondents said when there is a vaccine or herd immunity. So you can see that residents and employers are now totally attuned to what the state's public health officials are saying, as well as just their own natural predisposition to not being in large groups. And I think that will govern the reopening plans into the future. So similarly, I'd say sometime into the positive warm months of next year is when we'll see major reopenings.
We're getting a couple of questions in here, so I'll go to those in a moment. But I did want to just go back to one comment, Rebecca, that you had made about the communication around safety issues, or maybe broaden it a little bit, some of the negative factors that we've been dealing with in downtowns, and how to talk about that in a realistic way with public officials or downtown stakeholders without, kind of creating a self-fulfilling prophecy or spiraling further down. Any insights from any of you on how you've kind of managed that communication challenge? Maybe Rebecca, start with you since you raised the issue.
Yeah, what was really interesting is, so I had my budget review with Metro Council this week, and I was absolutely stunned, because usually, those are fraught with crazy. And they were unilaterally supportive of downtown, which I thought was a very encouraging, and we have a very big district, and there are 32 Metro Council people all over an entire county. But even the most deeply suburban folks there was not a single Metro Council person that did not express their support for downtown, which I think is a great opportunity for all of us, because I think that people also appreciate our organizations more than ever and what we do, because we've had such a big role in being out there on the street. Then in terms of other messaging, again, really flipping that on its head and having the business community handle a lot of that messaging has been something that has been incredibly, I think, positive and much more effective than if our organization, because we're the Downtown Partnership, of course we're going to give positive messaging about downtown. So having business leaders do that, I think, has been really enormously impactful.
Andrew, I can only imagine what that challenge has been for you with 100 straight days of protests right in the heart of downtown. How have you managed your way through some of that communication challenge?
Yeah, it's worth noting I have never experienced anything like this in my life. And while the whole city is not on fire, that should be noted, and we are not all, truly living in a war zone. there certainly has been extended periods and protracted periods of unrest, and I would clearly delineate between demonstrations and protests, which we welcome, and frankly, that's our right as a society, and those who commit acts of political violence, and that has included theft, graffiti, rioting, arson, any number of bad activities. Just so everyone is aware, recent polling by our local public broadcast station indicated that 52% of all of our residents see the city and the region on the wrong track, which is an all-time high in that consideration. And so, of course, relations are strained. And because I think, frankly, there's a deep, deep racial past here in Oregon. For those of you who don't know, we joined the side of the Union, of course, in the Civil War. However, we joined as a Union state that forbid free Black residents. And so that history has created this as one of the whitest cities and whitest states in the nation. And so I believe there's a deep reckoning that is happening here amongst all residents of the state. And that's playing out in our streets, because you've seen a lot of prevarication between our elected leaders who oftentimes publicly state that they don't necessarily understand, or they believe that there is justification for destruction of property, for arson, and for a lack of condemning what would anywhere be judged as truly bad behavior that no one accepts in no circumstance and under no condition. So it has created an extreme strain with our elected officials to try and regulate and understand the difference between political violence and peaceful demonstrations. And that's deeply concerning, of course, has naturally created not just a tension with us as a business community, but I think also people who don't understand how it is that we could be here to this day still seeing the destruction of our downtown core. So it's a deeply problematic condition.
Michael, what have the main communication challenges been for you through this period?
It's this disruption of life and so many of our communication channels. We have launched a new campaign and tried to, we're working very closely with our health director, because we think it is not too early to invite people back and to actually do programming where it's not a festival, but every weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we are closing a block or multiple blocks. We're taking a parking lot, and we're running movie night. We've brought a brewery in to create a beer garden. It's fenced in. We count people in, we count people out. We take down their information. We take their, for tracking. We take phone numbers. We take their temperature. I mean, everything that our health director advises us to do, because we're trying to show that there can be innovation, because chances are this is not a pandemic, but an endemic, and we're going to have to find ways to live with it. So it's going to take innovation in commerce and placemaking and activation and marketing. So that's where we find ourselves today.
Yeah, Tammy, it sounds like Denver's going on the offensive with some new initiatives, but how does that kind of play into your communication strategy at this point, or what are you saying?
Yeah,
right now?
I mean, we are going on the offensive, but we definitely are dealing with all of the other things that you're hearing today in many ways reactively, because that's the environment we're in, as well as looking forward. But I do want to add one other point about something that we're seeing around communication. I think that at times like this, especially in urban centers, we start to have reactive policy. So part of our communication and messaging right now is don't craft policy, drive policy based on a current moment in time, but because that's what we're seeing. And all politics really are local. And a lot of times local citizens don't understand that the policy changes that occur seemingly to solve an immediate problem have magnificent long-term impacts in the way a city is run, managed, can prosper and grow. So some of our messaging is also one of, we need some patience. We can't have every answer to every problem today just because the problem showed up. And we've already seen some policies get pushed through that, again, they work for this week, but in 2 years, not only do they not work, they dramatically change our landscape. So that's part of our messaging as well.
Yeah, if I had a nickel for every time I talked to our council members about unintended consequences, I would be a wealthy man. So we did have one question come into the Q&A. First of all, Rick, I see you find our mutual friend Alfredo on chat, so I'm glad you guys got reacquainted and can kind of take a conversation offline. There was a question in the chat, and probably not unexpected, to really focus in a little bit more on the challenge of homelessness in a downtown core, kind of specific strategies that you or your cities are using, how those are working at a time when I think unsheltered homelessness generally is increasing across the country. So, Debbie, maybe I'll start with you because I know that's been a big challenge in Denver, and then we'll just go around the horn on that topic.
Yeah, it is all consuming on any given day. We're looking at about 4 or 5 key initiatives right now. Next week, our voters will vote on a ballot initiative to implement a homelessness resolution tax. We don't believe that dollars are the answer. They're part of the solution, and so we are supportive of that. It will deliver $40 million a year to the cause, but we're still having a hard time understanding how much we're actually spending on the cause right now, and that's really critical. So to help address that, we've formed a business coalition on homelessness. We found that the Downtown Denver partnership was consistently being the face, constantly addressing from the business community side of things, and we just can't bear that all on ourselves anymore. So we formed this coalition that spans the city and is beginning to touch on other parts of the region, but it is Denver-centric focused. We have 3 core goals: making sure that the business community really understands the facts in order for them to be able to really ask the right questions and propose the right policies. 2, to provide a platform for funding and innovative new approaches and ideas, and co-creation and collaboration with our service providers and the public sector. We are, as a community, continuing to look at safe outdoor spaces. It was heavily advocated for by many council people, whereby you would create these sanctioned campgrounds. The mayor turned it back to council and said, great, you give me a location in each of your council districts, and it's come to a bit of a screeching halt since that happened, for all the reasons you all can imagine. So we certainly don't have the answers, and the challenge is certainly growing. We have to get it fixed. It's draining our community, cultural, our brand, our money, our resources, let alone helping these people in need.
Thanks. Michael, you're in a mild climate. How does this issue play out in Charlotte?
Yeah, so you won't be surprised that we've had a very similar approach to what Tammy just described. We had really good results on an initiative that we launched about 6 years ago around housing first. And it was a very specific focus. We see homelessness as a very urban issue. We don't want to be the experts, but we want to know the experts and convene them and kind of bring systematic approach to it. So with that, we were able to get government, business, and some real experts, including our housing authority, to the table to bring some Section 8 vouchers to build permanent supportive housing as a part of it. And we went out and did a census and knew every individual in crisis by name, and then set goals on how we would reduce it. It went very well for 4 years, and then it didn't. And the reason being is we focused on one group, and you have to look at the entire system. And what we found is the pipeline of people getting into chronically homeless positions grew. And so what we've recently done is we've been able to get McKinsey to do an assignment for us pro bono. We've got the band back together. We're going to look citywide, and we're going to be looking, as Tammy just called out, to create a system-wide strategic plan for addressing homelessness across Mecklenburg County. And it will be to create a lexicon and a real understanding of what the issue is, a plan that everybody can believe in. And if we do that, then we think it'll be easier to raise public and private money to get it done.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Andrew, I know the West Coast cities have been probably dealing with this issue even for a longer period of time than most of the rest of us. What are you doing in Portland?
Yeah, I appreciate that this is the preeminent issue for, I would say, the West Coast region, and just moving again from being born and raised in Milwaukee, living in Brooklyn for 2 decades, and then being here. I've never seen the conditions that are on the streets of a major American city like I do here in Portland. And in fact, last year, the point in time count released indicated a 25% increase in unsheltered individuals. It's a humanitarian crisis is the only way to define it. I'm particularly proud of the work of our downtown services, which employ what's known as the Clean Start program. I think a lot of people have similar tools in the kit for downtown services, where we have formerly unsheltered individuals who are living on the streets of our downtown, cleaning and caring for our center city and earning a wage, going through treatment, going through services, and being established in permanent housing that help to transition them from that very life of living on the street to actually caring for it, beautifying it, and being proud of their service. And I think it's an innovative program. It's one I know a lot of downtowns employ. And then we went through a 2-year ballot writing initiative here, led by the business community. One of my former board chairs, in fact, was the founder of it, that was done hand in hand with public officials, service providers, data experts to form a regional solution to address chronic unsheltered homelessness in our region by providing services first. And it passed in May. We were one of the lead spokespersons for the campaign. It's a $250 million annual regional revenue stream to be able to bring to scale the services and solutions that we all know addressed homelessness, and particularly chronic homelessness. That takes effect starting on January 1st with intense accountability measures built into it, oversight, and a very particular point to how we move the needle and judging ourselves in a renewal in 10 years to make sure that voters approve of the work we're doing. It's called Here Together is the name, and I would encourage everybody to explore it, because it was to the point where we knew we had to do something, and we hope starting on January 1st, we will see substantial changes. We expect them, and we owe it to our residents and to everybody that's going to be paying this tax to make it happen and to change, because it's to the point where any human being with any moral compass looks on our street and is just devastated. And so we needed to change. And I think it sounds like everybody else arrived at the exact same conclusion at precisely the same time. So we're deep in it and really appreciate that question.
Great. Thanks for that.
Andrew,
That initiative, that'll be important to look at. And Rebecca, how about Louisville? Again, I'm sure you're dealing with it, as we all are.
Yeah, I would say ditto. I think we're all have come to the best professional strategy. One thing that we've done, though, because people here don't get out much, and so they don't really experience other downtowns. And so one of the things we've been doing is a lot of education around this notion of homeless versus folks who have drug dependency versus folks who are panhandling versus folks who are trafficked versus folks with mental illness, and how important it is to address each of those parts of the Venn diagram. Although it turns out a lot of people don't know what a Venn diagram is, but it is. I think that I agree entirely with all those strategies, and we're doing a number of things like that. But always happy to hear from my colleagues about where they are with things.
Well, we are almost at the end of our hour, so why don't we wrap up, and we'll just kind of do a lightning round, and instead of going east to west, we'll go west to East Coast this time, and maybe just your last thoughts about the future of your city and the future of urban America as we kind of work our way through this incredibly unprecedented, tumultuous time. So Andrew, why don't you kick us off with?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a downtown fan. I love downtowns. They are the heartbeat of culture and commerce. And I'm optimistic. I'm perennially optimistic. I believe the opportunity that's present, I view this as truly opportunity, will allow us to reimagine the way that we relate with space, in particular our flagship cities and downtowns across the region. It will inevitably create change that we are not going to be able to recognize in this moment. But I think the key is for all of us as the people that hold the most sacred space, in my opinion, which is downtowns of cities, as the things that we care for and steward, it's our obligation to be innovative and to be thinking about how we can use this and pivot in the moment and use some of these remarkable tools, ideas, and concepts, not just for the now, but into the future, so that when we do rebuild, when we do reopen, things look different, feel different, and are better for all of our residents, and maybe even go a long way to addressing some of the deep racial inequity that we're experiencing that's driving some of the cultural unrest across our nation. And that's probably a good thing and long overdue. So appreciate you bringing us together, and optimistic forever.
It's a hopeful message. Thank you. Tammy, what are your last words?
Well, I believe that it's not just something that all of us on a call value in terms of ensuring our center cities thrive. It is a cultural imperative that our center cities thrive. Center cities are the places where people spontaneously engage, they connect. The biggest, boldest, brightest ideas from culture to business to innovation emanate from the areas where there's density and a wide mix of people and businesses and culture coming together. So it's our responsibility to find a way to navigate this. It's our responsibility to find a way to make our cities better coming out of it. And I think you're going to see dramatic changes in design, significance of our public spaces and gathering areas is going to grow, and center cities as a place to support mental health will become increasingly important. And overall, I am a believer. Cities have thrived through wars and pandemics, and people always come back, and there's a reason for it, because we are a society that needs to be together. So I'm optimistic. We just need to get through it.
Thanks, Tammy. Rebecca.
I'm optimistic as well. And I think that cities, downtowns are uniquely positioned because they are for all, to knit communities that have gone through the level of unrest that all of our communities have. That we're really the place where people can knit back together. And I think that is one of our many, many focuses, in the next 6 months, which is challenging to do when public events are challenged, but we're going to do it anyway, because really downtowns are the central. Tammy hit the nail on the head. So.
Thanks, Rebecca. And Michael, give you the last word on this panel.
Yeah, so I too am optimistic. I think that we need to be offering encouragement to our stakeholders in incredible and intentional ways. Yet in the same breath, we're challenged like we never have been. And we should take advantage of this time where the winds are down, we're not running downhill, to think about the values-based commons that we offer to our communities. And what are small ways that we can be more inclusive, that we can be more innovative. And I like the challenge that Tammy offered of continuing to pull more chairs up to the table and allowing our communities to jointly own this revitalization. Now, you can look over your shoulder and still see the thriving 19s and teens that we enjoyed, but we are going to have to build this thing back kind of one brick at a time. And that's the work that lies ahead. I think it does take us being on it today. And, I'm an old basketball coach. I mean, running that full court press, black diamond, 1-2-1-1, slapping every pass. And it does take that kind of comprehensive approach. But yeah, I look forward to the work we'll do together.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to conclude with a comment I'm just seeing in the chat from one of our board members. It's nice to know we're all on similar issues and we can share best practices across the country. So to all of you, thanks for making the time. I know how incredibly busy you all are, so we're grateful for your time. And thanks to everybody who tuned in today. This program will be available on the Downtown Council YouTube channel, and we'll be sharing it out with our panelists as well, and if they want to share it with their network. So really engaging conversation, important work ahead, and can't thank you enough for being part of it today. Thanks all. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks for bringing us together, Steve. Thank you, everyone.